Welcome to Spider-Verse Minute, the tri-weekly podcast where we watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1 minute at a time. I'm Caroline Slater.
And I'm her brother Sean.
And today we are talking about minute 110. It starts with the additional voices credit and ends a minute later with imagery and animations credit.
What did you title this minute?
Let the names begin!
Yes, this is the first chunk of big lists of names that we get.
Yeah, I have, just so our listeners know at home, I am going to be keeping a counter of how many times either my name or Sean's name appear in the credits. Not our full names, just our first names. We didn't work on this movie. I will also be counting any variations of our spellings that maybe we don't spell it that way, but it is a way to spell our names. And I'm giving myself some leeway, not so much with Sean, but I'll give myself some leeway because I have also gotten other names, such as Carolyn. So Carolyn will also be counted for my name. Sean's just getting Sean. Do you have any real notes, Sean?
Yeah, I actually do have a couple of real notes for this, from this minute.
I'm glad one of us does.
Yeah, one of the first things I wanted to point out was just one job that I didn't really know what it did, so I looked it up to find out, and then the other one that I thought was just an interesting job for this particular project. The first one is the 3D stereoscopic supervisors, and just the 3D stereoscopic bit was what I wasn't sure about. And they're the ones that just help make the movie 3D.
Oh.
Like for releases in like 3D theaters and stuff like that.
Oh.
So they specialize in how to make sure that like colors don't contrast, like different ways colors can contrast, I guess can cause difficulty with that and stuff like that. So they help out with that.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm kind of curious to know how hard that is to do.
Yeah, compared to other just like a regular like animation supervisor. The other job that I just thought was interesting that they had, and partly just the sheer amount that they had for it, was that they had 5 comic book artists. And part of me thinks that this might be just like them crediting people for real covers that they used, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because like one of them is Sarah Pichelli, who did art for Miles's original run, and so I'm wondering if just like some of the interiors that they had of him could possibly be that. And they have some of the other people, such as they have Jason Latour, Rico Renzi, and Robbie Rodriguez are 3 of the other ones, and they worked on the Spider-Gwen series, but like Jason Latour was the writer for hers, so I'm not sure if they were redoing work in the movie or if it's just because they used like covers and images from their stuff they had to go in and get credited. And then the last name they have on the list is Marcello Vignali, or Marcello. Not exactly sure. Sorry, Mr. Vignali.
Sorry, sir.
I know he was the one, we had talked about it briefly when we saw it, but he was the one that did the actual, like, a good chunk of the made-up interiors and covers. And so, like, when Miles was reading the What If comics and, like, the modified covers from the classic Spider-Man series, he was the one that did the work on those. So I'm not sure if the other 4 also did work including it. I know Sarah Pichelli was attributed for the alternative Miles cover that they did, the Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1 cover. I know that's attributed to her because she did the original cover, and so I think they brought her in for this alternate one where they just stuck this version of Miles on the cover. So I don't know what the other three people did. But I just saw that and I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense that they have that in this movie.
It does. Especially with how many comics we see, both used as a form of backstory and not.
Yeah. It's also kind of interesting that, like, they didn't have, and maybe some of them acted as that, but they didn't have, like, consultants, maybe.
Yeah.
And it might have just been, like, some of the higher-ups were the consultants on that, like, oh, this is how you do this and this.
Maybe.
But there is that. And then this is also, like I had said, the beginning, or like you had said, is the beginning of not the real credits, but the long credits. And so there's about 4 groups of people working in this that we see in this part, and 4 like big groups of people, not just the like, oh, this is the, department head and whatnot, but this is the grunts doing the work here. And the first thing you mentioned, the additional voices. Do you want to take a guess how many there were?
No, I don't want to take a guess.
They had 18 voice actors doing additional voices for this movie, which is a little bit surprising, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like that number's both high and low at the same time.
It feels weird because I'm trying to think of like all the additional voices that would like be needed, and I can only think of like a few things, and even then I'm like
it's probably a lot of just the background characters.
I think a lot of it is more of like background crowd scenes. Like the first thing that came to mind was like Miles at school, a few of the interview scenes, things like that.
Yeah. And then the next group we get are the story artists. Mm-hmm. And here we have 17 story artists working on the project. They do the work, like a lot of pre-production work kind of, and get things prepped and make sure things start to flow. And then we move into the character designers, where we have 9 of them, and they're the ones that design the characters.
What?
I know, shocking. But they take the work from like the story artists and further develop those and start fleshing them out as like models a bit more. And then those 9 character designers pass their work off to the 33 people in the visual department who do a lot more of the visual works and background stuff and all the other visual stuff you see.
Mm-hmm.
I also like in credits how they kind of go through that, like the progress is it's like kind of who worked on the project first to last.
Yeah, that is pretty neat. It's always interesting. Sometimes I remember when I was younger, I would watch credits and be like, how did they organize who got their names where? Because this is not alphabetical order. This makes a lot more sense.
Was there anything you wanted to touch on left in the minute, or should I talk about some box office numbers?
I don't really have anything else to add for the minute, just that neither of our names or any variations of our names were in the credits for this minute.
Yeah.
That is all I have. So let's talk about box office.
Yeah, so I like numbers. Numbers are fun, and stats and whatnot, as you can tell, because I just listed off the number of people working in different roles. But usually people like these numbers a bit more. So this movie premiered December 14th, 2018. And it was, of the 2018 releases, it was 24th globally of the year. And I believe that includes its full run and not just its run for 2018, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay. And just some like subcategories it can be placed into. It was the number 4 Sony movie of the year, beaten out by Venom, Jumanji, and Hotel Transylvania 3. And it was the number 5 animated movie of the year, being beaten out by Incredibles 2, Ralph Breaks the Internet, again Hotel Transylvania 3, and The Grinch, which The Grinch kind of surprised me, and Hotel Transylvania kind of surprised me, but everything else makes sense.
Yeah, Grinch I'm a little surprised by, but also not. Just because Illumination tends to bring in a lot of families, and How the Grinch Stole Christmas is a very recognizable property, and like a lot of people like it.
Yeah, and its opening weekend, it was number 1 with 48 million, just over, beating out Ralph Breaks the Internet and The Grinch from their previous. They had opened earlier in the year, so this one came in and slotted in above those. And then it lasted 112 days in the theater, I don't know if in the theaters. I don't know if that's long or not.
I'm not really sure either. I'm not that familiar with how long movies typically stay. I know when it's short, it's bad. Like I've heard like first thing I could think of is Gem and the Holograms movie was only in theaters for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, wow, no one's seeing this movie. But in terms of how long it's in theaters, I don't know what's good. I felt like it was in theaters for a long time, though.
Yeah. There was this really weird bump in the middle of March where it had, like, more than doubled its, like, previous week's gross income. And I was just like, why is this happening? And then I realized a lot of the awards had come out. And so that was when, like, everyone was like, oh, this movie just won 1.5 billion awards.
So many awards. Let's go see what the hype's about.
And they had also, like, the number of theaters it was in quadrupled. And so that happens as when you have a bunch of theaters. But they only did that for the week and then they dropped it back down. It was really interesting because, like, I don't really pay attention to these numbers at all, ever.
Yeah.
And it was just, like... yeah, interesting to just look at those numbers. And I mean, they're probably rather normal numbers. Like there's that probably happens to a lot of big movies. I had never seen those before. Same.
Like I'm familiar with certain things about movies. The business number side of it, not so much. No, not as familiar. So to me, that's like, that seems insane. But I'm also like, that might be totally normal.
Yeah. That was all I had for the box office numbers. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up?
We are a family of nerds, so the numbers are always interesting to look at. And especially with this movie because, like I said earlier, animated superhero movies especially are kind of in a weird place. In the sort of sphere of movies, I guess. I don't really know how else to break it down, where, like, people associate superhero movies with a certain age, and then they associate animated movies with a certain age, and then you put superhero animated movie together, and then that's, like, a different age, so the numbers are really interesting to look at for me, because it's, like, I know what some people thought before they saw the movie. They were like, well, it's for this or this, like, it can't be that good, and then all this stuff happened, people saw it, and they're like, oh, it's that good.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today. Join us on Friday for minute 111, where we continue to see some of the credits.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.